to give it a 10 degrees angle on. There's a black edge there.
Okay. Sorry, didn't know. Okay. Oopsie. Okay. Uh-huh. That's my blonde hair.
Yeah, otherwise, there would be a cat.
Yeah, no, that's only for finishes. Søren,
Yes.
welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to Radio Valtville. So you don't know, and we said that before, you don't know what's happening.
Except that I'm being recorded with two people. One I know and one I don't.
Yes. Very good. So we're in the same boat because we don't know what's happening either.
Okay.
So it really is just, let's start talking and see where we go with all of this.
You want it as authentic as it gets.
The reality, and if that talk goes for about 30 minutes, we're totally fine. If it goes for 3 hours, we're totally
Is
fine.
cursing allowed?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's no censorship,
That's
no
authentic,
we don't need to meet any compliance
Nope.
rules.
All
So
right.
so we're absolutely fine.
Fantastic.
Who are you?
Well, go on.
Oh my god.
Who am I? I'm a Danish citizen
Mm-hmm.
still.
Yes.
Born in 1963 in the island where Copenhagen is, but out on the countryside.
Mm-hmm.
My parents, my mom was at home.
Mm-hmm.
Women was that back then. My dad was a doctor, later a psychiatrist, and we lived at the hospital. It's a place called St. Hannes in Denmark. It's the biggest, or was the biggest psychiatric hospital in Northern Europe for
Mhm.
a long time. And he was the leader there. And we grew up at this place. So I have had mad people around me from early childhood.
Any rub off from this?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
that's exactly why I mentioned it. Because I thought you might ask that question, yeah. And why would I not be mad myself? No, I'm not.
Yeah.
But I have at least opened up to various mindsets. I can give you an example.
Please.
One of the patients my father had that he helped very much. He was schizophrenic. Had a difficult time.
And you still how old have you been?
At the time I would have been around 6 years, 5, 6,
6 years.
7 years, yeah,
Oh, okay.
when we lived there.
Wow.
But this patient was quite. We had a nice little villa at the premises of the hospital at the outskirts, with beautiful view over the fjord. It's a nice place. And this guy, after my father helped him, came every morning and every evening. And we had a hedge in front, no gate, but just a walkway up to the front door.
Mm-hmm.
And when he came to the opening between the hedge, he was opening a big imaginary door and walking up in front of our entrance. And then he was ringing imaginary bells. And then he turned around and walked out. And when he walked out, he always did like that with the elbow to shut the door, imaginary door after him. That's one guy. He was so happy, so he rang with the bells in heaven for my family to bless us.
Oh wow.
That's how. So when you talk about madness,
Mhm.
I have a different opinion.
Yes.
So that's just the start, and then we move out. My parents gets divorced. We move into the summer house.
What year did they get divorced?
Yeah, 63. It would have been 75-ish.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Can't remember exactly.
And how was that at that time in Denmark? Because 75-ish getting divorced, for example, in Germany, where I grew up,
Yeah.
that would have been a stigma for the mother, for the children, and all of that. How was that in Denmark?
I think it was more or less the same. Maybe it was a little further ahead.
Mhm.
It was more normal or accepted. But it was always difficult for the women because they were not on the job market as they are today. But my parents made amendable divorce, so they still stayed friends. Actually, they still, for all the years my father lived, went out on their wedding day to have dinner together,
Oh no.
even though they're new spouses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they also agreed, so it was basically a bigger family. They just didn't. They grew apart for some reason. But and then we moved with my mom to first our summer house, and there the neighbor felt sorry for me, so he taught me how to sail a sailboat, and that was good. So I learned to sail.
That's so cool.
Keelboat boat, basically. The first time I was basically in the harbor, and they were sitting there with my mom and others having drinks, and they had these little Optimist boats, tiny boats, and they just dumped me in there and said, "Sail, not out of the harbor," and I had to find out.
Good luck, bye.
So that's how that started, and that has been something I've been enjoying since.
Yeah.
And then later on, we moved to Copenhagen for a short while, and then we moved to north of Copenhagen, a place called Hørsholm. You wouldn't know it. It's halfway between Copenhagen and Elsinore. That is the corner where this big castle is, where Hamlet say to be or not to be.
To be or not to be. Yes.
So that's where we lived and grew. That was my teenage. My teenage was basically
in Copenhagen.
It's outside Copenhagen.
Outside of Copenhagen.
It's some 30 kilometers outside Copenhagen. Yeah. So it's almost Copenhagen. Yeah. It's close. Yeah. It's like 2 kids to Zurich, basically.
Yeah.
And there, what was it? I forgot what I wanted. Yeah, yes, I was growing up there with high school and starting university also from there, and then I moved away. But while I was living there, we were, teenage boys. Teenage boys do stuff. You've been a teenager, I'm sure you know. So we had mopeds, and we were quite technical, so we quite fast find out how to make these mopeds drive a whole lot faster.
Yeah.
Faster than the police would allow. And so we were a little group of guys driving around on the mopeds. And I got this blue Yamaha 4 gears. It's still a relic that people pay a lot of money for, even here. I had to get that not because of I specifically liked that moped, but my understanding was that most girls wanted a boyfriend with a blue Yamaha 4 gears.
Oh my god!
Oh, of course.
So
oh my god!
When you've been in that age too, you know how stupid you can be.
It just boys with a motorbike.
Yeah.
I know.
This is
and
very cool.
Tattoos and all that. I know.
I'm not for tattoos.
No.
You're not in for tattoos?
No.
Frank is his arms are fully covered.
Yeah, I can see that. At least the hands. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and Søren, by the way, still has a big passion for motorbikes.
Yeah, I'll get to that. But
me too. We get to
be here.
We had the same thing. I grew up in a small city in Schleswig-Holstein.
Yeah, okay, so it's close enough.
Yeah, close enough. Yeah. And which is about 30 kilometers from Hamburg.
Yeah.
So basically, the same with you, where you grew up, and Copenhagen. And in the 80s, we had the 80er. Yeah. So the motorbikes with 80 cubic centimeters of displacement.
Yep.
And everybody has that, Zündapp and Hercules.
Yeah.
Malaguti, Vespa, and all that.
When there's no recordings, we need to have a beer and talk about the old days.
Stuff we still can remember.
Yep. But the basically, it's interesting you say these bad guys with tattoos and all over. We were 5 guys in this group, and we never did anything evil.
I never said the bad guy thing. That was Frank.
Yeah, but we were nice guys.
Yeah,
I can imagine.
And they weren't all of them. Most of them were not. So you're right about that. And when I meet the locals here in Valchwil and sit and talk to them, they were no damn different.
Yeah, of course not. Of course not.
In Schleswig-Holstein in Germany, they're boys all over.
Yeah.
Girls too, by the way.
Yeah. I agree.
So I grew up there, but I started also gymnasium, and at the gymnasium at the age of 15, I started in gymnasium. I stumbled over something that defined my life, and that's a computer.
Mm-hmm.
It was the first gymnasium in Denmark that bought a computer. Nobody knew what it was. We're talking 1979, something like that, 78 even. Oh, I can't remember anymore.
What was it? Commodore?
No. It
Atari?
was a bigger computer. It was a Unix-based, or it wasn't Unix back then, but it was similar. built by something called Danish Digital Electronics, I think, DDE. So they bought this thing with four terminals and.
So like a mid-range computer, like DEC or AS400 IBM.
Something like that.
Yes.
Or before a predecessor to these things. Yeah. So there's 4 terminals, and there was 64 kilobytes of RAM in it.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yes.
And it had these big floppy disks. That was also first time
before
that.
8-inch.
8-inch, yeah. So I started looking at that, and because of looking at that so intensively, because I got completely geeked out on that, I didn't follow much of my study.
What did you study?
Gymnasium.
So school. Still at school.
No studies.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And where did I come from?
You stumbled on the computer. So
the
computer fully caught your attention.
Yeah. What I did then was simply, maybe you would understand, but what I did, I've made sure they bought a matrix printer, but there was no printer driver. So I had to build a printer driver.
Of course, as you
so
do.
I built a printer driver, so you could take a text file and print.
Yes.
And the next thing I did was I dumped the entire operating system that was in the lower 16 kilobyte. I dumped that in hexadecimal on paper.
Wow.
And then I took a CPU manual, 8080 CPU manual, and hand translated that into mnemonics, and then understood what the operating system did and started making changes to it. Because it was in RAM, it was loaded from ROM to RAM when it started up. Then I could make some software, all written in assembler, all programmed in hexadecimal. We're crazy.
But Søren, we really need to sit down and geek out.
Yeah, happy to do that.
All of this stuff.
But let me continue while I remember the point.
I know about that.
Because that created, I got vast knowledge of how computers work way before other people did. And I ended up actually having what do you call it? Drove some lessons for both other students and teachers who wanted to learn about that, and got paid for that during my gymnasium time. After gymnasium, this is what I wanted to do. So a friend of mine, his dad was CEO or director, it was called back then, of Rank Xerox, the Xerox Corporation in Scandinavia. And they just got this Xerox Star 8010, I think they called it.
Xerox, that's the printer.
It's not a printer. No, it's a computer.
Not at that time.
But Xerox now is known as printers.
Yes, they also make printers, but this is a computer.
Okay. Yep.
And if you let me continue, it's a computer, the first computer that used a graphical user interface. Okay. That is what it's famous for. And the people who invented that left Xerox Corporation and created Apple. Oh. So that's where it comes from. But they made this this fantastic machine with a graphical user interface. And me and my friend thought, we're going to do that. So we set out 1 year before starting university in building a computer. So he would build basically the software, and I would build the hardware and the low-level operating system. We thought that was a fair share. I spent a year and I succeeded. Actually, I had a full 16-bit computer with 1 megabyte of dynamic RAM that was just invented at that time. It was really hard to get to run. And I built an operating system for it that looked a bit like CP/M. He, however, thought that building a graphical user interface on top of this with all the drivers and things was easy. It wasn't. So he never succeeded, and we ended the project before that. I still have the computer. So I think my mom has it in her basement, wire wrapped. So then I also learned about that. And then I started studying at DTU, it's the Danish version of ETH, where I studied to be an engineer, Master of Engineering. And my focus was on building hardware. I wanted to build chips. However, in the DTU back then, I think it still is, there's a limit to how many people can be in one course. And there's a tree structure that defines if you don't have the root, you're not allowed to apply for others. So you need that one entry point. And I never got the entry point because I was always drawing at bad. It's not prioritized in any way.
Yeah.
And when there's 200 receipts and 1,000 seeking, I had bad luck. But I had great luck with everything software. So which was just as much overrun. So I ended up being a software engineer, exiting from there. And during that time, I stumbled across something else. I think we're now talking 81, 82, 83 maybe. I stumbled across TCP/IP. What is that? That is the protocol underlying the entire internet. So every email and web page, etc., is running on TCP, which is over IP.
Transmission Control Protocol / Internet Protocol.
Yes.
So this is the TCP/IP.
And here, there's more we have to talk about.
I was born in '89, so you're still talking.
You know, in '89,
pre-birth.
89 we're talking 83.
Yeah.
In '89, Tim Berners-Lee invents HTTP, or the web protocol, down in Geneva.
HTTP.
So it's 6 years before the World Wide Web existed. There was email, DNS, and what is it called? Various types of prompts. And I built the software for that myself. So I started building multi-threaded servers and built a mail server because I started a little bad sequence over. So I started a company. I saw this idea about how information could become democratically available for everyone. How people could sit in one country and look across the fence to another country, see why the grass is greener, and maybe challenge their own government. Or how people in third world countries with no money could access universities and get solid books or information where otherwise they have to pay more than a month's salary for half a book. That's still the case in Africa. So the internet was a way of creating freedom for people globally and equality. So I was really into this. So I wanted to do this. I wanted to start an internet service provider, the first in Denmark. I asked my dad, and if he can help me with a little money so we can have a little office. And my dad said, no fucking way, my son. If you do that, you end up in jail in 2 years because I have heard that internet is all pornography. And if you do it anyway, you're not my son anymore. So that was pretty hard. He was pretty upset about it. There's more to the story. It comes later. I do it anyway. And I don't talk to my father for some time, for some years. He's quite reluctant to do that. So I hire some friends from DTU, from ETH, Danish DTU, to help me set this up. And since we don't have an office, we set up modems in our homes. And I have this leased line to the internet, 16 kilobit per second. That was really state of the art back then.
So can I please hold your? Can I interrupt you? I need to show you something.
Yeah.
So because I was starting around that time with all of this, and I kept some documents. So one of the things that I kept is a product catalog from the company that I worked for, which was a value-added distributor at that time.
Yeah.
Talking about modems, it has the Dr. Neuhaus modems in here, modems with 2600 kilobit per 2400 kilobit per second, all of that. So I know exactly what you're talking about because we had the same thing. We had the same thing. It's right over here.
So where was I?
With the
leased line.
With the line 16.
Yeah. So people were calling. My friends were calling in from modems so they could get on the internet. And within 2-3 months, I was on the front page of the biggest business newspaper in Denmark, in a column on the side with the title "The Stupidest Company in the Country."
No.
And why?
Do you still have that?
I think my mom has it.
Can we call your mom?
But let me. There's many more things. So hang on.
Okay, so we're not interrupting anymore.
Frank is very excited.
Much more. But because I was giving my employees free internet and letting them work from home. That was the stupid thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Forward to today, it's not stupid anymore after COVID. Certainly
after
not.
how many years? We're talking 83, 84?
Yeah, 50 years or something like that. 40 years.
Very visionary at that time. Very forward.
Yeah.
So I've been forward all the time. Too much forward.
Yeah.
And
Søren is always out.
Yeah, welcome to the club.
Out in space.
So, but anyway, the internet service provider had started working. So there was a couple of people who came in and helped me with that, sales guy, among other things. And but I did the most of the sales. So when I had to sell an email service to a carpenter down the street, for example, it was usually the same thing. He would say, okay, if I buy an email from him, but then my daughter should have a free email. Can you do that? And my wife and my sofa also need a free email. Can you do that? And I was like, yeah, why not? But the business model of mail servers back then was such that you bought one mail server and then you got one domain and 10 emails for that price. When you want email number 11, you have to buy a package to open up with a key. That was quite expensive, and then you get 10 more emails. And if you wanted another domain, it was a fortune and 10 emails.
Yes.
And you have to do the same with 11. So I got quite tired of that. So I built an email server. And I was quite tired of the business model, so I said, fuck them. And I sold this on the net without any marketing at all for $299. And there was no limit to domains, no limit to emails. The limit was your computer RAM, basically.
So you completely changed the business model of the market, not only providing the service and writing the technology yourself, but you created a business model that was never heard of.
Yeah, it was not. It might have been heard of, but in other areas, other markets, but not in the email market. There was only 2 or 3, 4 maybe players.
Yeah.
And I in half a year had 25% of the world market. I made 10,000 francs a day in sales of mail servers, maybe more. It was pouring in. Yeah. So I got quite wealthy quite fast. And then we also had web pages and other things. And my dad started looking at me because suddenly I drove better cars. And it was so we started talking again. And then when my dad comes and visits one evening at my apartment with his wife for dinner, and he's a psychiatrist. She was also a neurologist and was writing her doctor's disputats. What is that?
Yeah, it's like
in
dissertation.
Yeah,
dissertation in English. That's right. Yeah. And she was writing about a psychiatric ailment called Gilles de la Tourette syndrome.
What?
Or Tourette's.
Tourette. Tourette syndrome.
She was writing about that, and she was complaining over the dinner table that she had probably to go to New York or somewhere else to find libraries with information because she couldn't find anything to reference. She needed information. And I said, have you tried the internet? And see, my dad was like that. And she was so desperate. She was, well, what do you mean? I'll show you. So we went to my office and I typed Gilles de la Tourette syndrome, which is very defining. And up came, 20, 30, 40 articles. And she was like, stop. Don't touch. Do I have a pen and paper? I just closed the browser. And she was like, oh, and then I opened it again and I typed again. At that time, my father snuck in and stood in the doorway and looking. And she was like, and she turned around to my dad and said, Rasmus, I think we need internet.
Yeah.
My dad was convinced after that.
Yes.
That's so, it's like, for me, it's like normal, right? So I grew up with this.
Yes, I'm older than you are.
Yeah, but it's kind of being in that story and like imagine.
Yeah. No, the old man actually got so interested in it that after he retired, he spent most of his days editing psychiatrically related articles on Wikipedia and adding his own. So he got really into it, and it was spent all his time on it, a lot of his time actually. So that was a win for me in the sense that I saw something about the democracy of some concept like the internet, and it actually ended up working, but it took a couple of decades. And it took 3 decades before Obama was standing on the world stage and saying that he believes the internet should be a human right. That's how long it took. Same thing happened. I sold this company. Okay, we have to follow the chronology.
Yeah.
So I sold this company in 97, 98. I was forced to because my 2 partners had majority.
So we're talking about that email server company, right?
Yeah, internet service provider with an
ISP.
So in ISP. Yeah. So So I sold that in 98 or 1998 probably, because my partners wanted to sell. They had majority. If we had waited a year, we would have entered the bubble. I probably had a 0 or 2 behind it, but I got out with 17 million Danish kroners, which was pretty good. And I was then taking off for half a year, traveling, enjoying my life a bit, coming home, finding a tax bill and thinking, no fucking way. So Denmark was 65% income tax.
Yeah,
65%.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was looking at the geography. Where can I find a better place? And 2 came up, and that's how I ended up here in 2nd of January. I arrived in Switzerland with my little suitcase, taking the train to Zug, and standing down there. And a beautiful day, I could see the Alps in the background, and nice place. So and I stayed since. Except that I took my money with me. We tried to, with a friend, a couple of friends, we started another company that didn't work out. It was some accounting software. And I ended up going back to Denmark, realizing it wasn't just the taxes that were nice here. It was a lot of other things. The people, the regime, the democracy is better. So I ended up wanting to come back. So I started drumming the old network, and one guy was saying, "Yeah, come down to Bane Investment in Fafikra, Schweiz, where I was helping with some software, and they paid a lot of money." So that was very good. I stay here. I got headhunted to another company doing some hedge fund accounting software. Kind of interesting. And then I started again entrepreneurship. I have to go back and say, during the time I had the company in Denmark, I started other companies with the proceeds. So I started many small things. Most of it didn't work. There was one that was a bank. I was doing some trading mechanism, what is called technical analysis on trading.
On charts and stocks and all that stuff, yeah.
So I built a lot of different things. I was part of setting up, but also the ideation behind what happened later to be called Saxo Bank. It's quite a known bank today. The owner is an old friend. There's 2 owners. The other is not an old friend. The not old friend lives here in Switzerland. The real old friend, he's still in Denmark. Kim. So there was a lot of other things going on. I've been starting things. Coming here, I just needed some income, so I needed a normal job. But as soon as I had enough,
a normal job,
and my wife Beata started to make some good money from her company also, I could stop and start trying to do something again. That was about the time where Snowden came with his revelations around the snooping and siphoning up of data from the internet, especially via email. There was one internet service provider or email service provider in US. I can't remember the name right now, but he closed his company, pretty big company, because NSA wanted him to give them the key so they could snoop on every email. I thought, no. So I started making some security software where basically the service provider where the email goes through is not responsible. They have a key for encrypting stuff, but encrypting that would only open one layer, and you need to go to the end to finally. So they could come with a subpoena, and he could say, "Yeah, knock yourself out, but you still need to go to the door of the recipient. I can tell you who the recipient is, but you need to go there and not here." So I started doing that, but never finished because I stumbled across something new called Bitcoin.
Yep.
A friend of mine, his name is Niklas Nikolajsen, the Bitcoin king, they call him. He called himself. He lives in Salesianum here. He bought Bitcoin and said, "Buy as many as you can." Should have listened probably, but I got interested in the technology, not the money. What I saw was the same as a déjà vu from the internet service provider time, from the freedom. Basically, I saw how money suddenly could travel across the planet, and how financial opportunity could become an equal playing field for everyone. For example, if you're in Africa today and you want to buy an option or buy a stock or something like that, the fee you have to pay to get this paper is more than a month's salary, where for us it's just a few hours. So the entry point to the financial world is barred by these fees. And with this technology, you could remove them. And that would basically mean democratization of access to opportunity.
Yes.
And we're not only, and that's what really, you're in my eyes, you're like super visionary all the time and always.
Thanks. Yeah.
No, and I think always for the good purpose of life in general, of the human beings. And we're not talking about the money thing. We're talking about how the technology can help people equally access market.
How it can improve the lives of others.
Yeah.
Basically, how do you put a smile on somebody else's face?
Yeah.
So using technology as a leverage for whatever goal it might be. You know, you said democratization of the access to that technology that may help you with whatever you want to achieve.
Basically, give the little guy in Africa in the village the same opportunities as the suited up guys at Wall Street. If he's good enough and doing the trading, he can win. So, but not only that, then I started looking at the Bitcoin I was looking at. I built my own blockchain actually. And there were some other people here in Zug that was also building another blockchain for the same reason. And that was the programmability in Bitcoin, which is called scripting, is very primitive. And I wanted something more. And there was another guy here who also wanted something more. And his name is Vitalik Buterin. You might have heard of him. He created Ethereum. But these guys were many more people, and they were well funded. I was just alone, and I couldn't keep up with that. So in the end, I started using theirs because it's damn good what they did. What they do is some way of programming how it works, called smart contracts. It's not a very telling name of that concept, but it's basically an example is I can make a bet with you or you, saying I believe that within the next 2 weeks it will be raining in Tokyo, while at the same time the sun will be shining in New York, and Barcelona would have won a football match within the last 2 hours. I put 1,000 francs on that. And you say, nah, Søren, I don't believe you. So we make this bet, and we wait a couple of weeks. We see suddenly it's one of the conditions is satisfied, and I say, oh, I won. And you say, no, it was actually, I think it was raining a little there, but we don't have proof, and you get into a dispute, and but with this concept of blockchain and basically storing the functionality on it, the programmability, we could give the money to the blockchain, to a smart contract. The smart contract would do nothing else. We program it ourselves. It would go and check the weather forecast in Tokyo, go and check the weather forecast in New York, and check Barcelona's webpage every hour. And if the condition is satisfied, it pays out to one, and if 2 weeks, and it pays out. And then you have an automated system. This is what you ask lawyers or notaries to do, and you pay a forest of money for that.
I agree.
You got it for free. So you and this you can expand this to quite an extent. To an extent where I believe, at least, that you could secure democratic processes, something that seems to be a bit relevant these days. What's happening in the US, at least. And that was really interesting to me. So we are a few guys here in Zug that start talking about it. We meet at a pub, at Schiff Bar in Zug, for a beer and trying to talk about it and agree that maybe we should do some more. So I make this Crypto Valley Forum meetup group where I ask if people want to come. And 7 shows up the first time. And a month later, that was 25. A month later, it was 75. And there was only room for 50 inside. So it started exploding, and within half a year, it exploded to be global. And that's when we decided, okay, we need to professionalize this. We need some people, we need some funding, really, because it's growing out of our hands. So I start recruiting for a board to Crypto Valley Association and set that up with the intent of raising capital and putting this, what shall we call it, this, or funding or supporting the effort of understanding how this can help various processes, how it can make things better for for a lot of people or secure democratic processes.
So basic research and development on the use cases.
What I needed was basically to fund or ask PhD students to try out making models.
Yeah.
It was more scientific or more academic and less money-centered.
Mm-hmm.
What happened, however, was something completely
I think
different.
in your mind it was that way.
No, we were many people who wanted it that way. But what happened was the money raised came. It was just not. When you talk to the others here, they will say that it was only in my mind, and I've heard that a couple of times. But that's not true. The truth is that people were really interested in what it could do until we raised like $500 million worth of ICOs in less than 2 months, and suddenly they wanted Ferraris instead. So what I got to see here was a smack in the face of the worst sides of humanity: greed, vanity, power. It was politicians involved. It was everything. Even top lawyers that came to help me turned at some point in time because it got too interesting. So it was a shit show, and I got very tired of it. I also won it. I ended actually getting the board out, which took me 1.5 years, and I got some bruises for trying, but I won it. And then I turned around and said, no more this, no more political games for me. Back to what I'm good at, and that's entrepreneurship. So that was a pretty good decision because the next thing that happens is that a guy I met during this Crypto Valley time, he's sitting in the US and wants to make what is called a DEX, or decentralized exchange, together with me. And we talk about that and agree that he needs to come over here. I set up shop, so I create the company here. And when he's arriving, we'll start coding. But it took half a year. It was during COVID. So he was sitting over there bored. So he started coding, but didn't tell me. He also accidentally sold some investments to other people before we had permission to do so. And I was legally responsible, which was a bit of a problem. I didn't know about it. And he finally comes during COVID, and he's on his 10 days quarantine. And 5 days in, I get back then it was still called Twitter, which I prefer. And somebody was tweeting that Søren and Michael, you have to consider the consequences of breaking all kinds of laws in Switzerland. I was like, what? So I call him. I will never forget the sound of his voice is still in there. I said, what is going on? And he says, I think I forgot to tell you something. And that was this, among other things, that. So we had to basically get lawyered up, and we won the case after half a year, something like that, 4 months. But there was nothing wrong. He hasn't done anything bad. It was just, basically an attempt and a hostile takeover from another angle. I won't get into the details, but the sum of it is that I got out of this with 0.16% of the token value, although we discussed at 20 to 80. So I didn't get 20, I'd get 0.16. That made me a multimillionaire in francs. And that is now 5 years ago. He became a multi-billionaire. He still lives here. The token value fell quite drastically, quite fast. I remember it was within a day, it was half, the next day half again. So it was, but there was still something left. And with that little left, that is enough for me to buy a car for my wife and a new car for myself and a motorcycle, 2 of them actually, and not much more. We also bought a little apartment thanks to you. You helped back when you worked in a bank. So we still have a little apartment. We are renting the house we have. He doesn't want to sell it. We would love to buy it, but he doesn't want to sell it. So we have that down there in the Dorf, the village, for in case shit happens, we have a place. And then we haven't spent money on anything extravagant. We could probably buy about a couple of Bentleys and waste it all on that, but I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm using it as I always did, trying to build something new. So now I'm building 2, maybe 3 new companies. My old companies is still trading. So this is how I try to grow the value of the money a little. I'm not very successful with that because I'm too focused on the other things. And the other things are two. One is here in Zug, where we're building an accounting system for crypto. Together with one of the big trojhänder here, we have they have helped us with information and insight into how this works. So we now have a software that can shorten the time it takes for a trojhand to do a crypto accounting from, say, 2-3 months of 4 or 5 people working on it to 5 minutes on one person at a mouse click. And that is somewhat revolutionary, especially because our software incorporates things that the competition don't do. I won't get into details in a public forum because it's a secret.
Sure. But what's the name of the company or the software?
Blockchamp. Blockchamp. It's not advertised anyway. There's a web page, but you just have a login and nothing. We don't have a user interface yet. We're not focused on that. We're focused on making functionality that works.
Yes.
We have the first client there, so we're working on that. And probably during this autumn, start of next year, we'll start having a user interface and people can log in and use it. That's one company. The other one is a company I bought in Denmark, actually, from a girl I met who later fucked me over for money. But I still have a company, and the company is called Microchange. Microchange makes sustainable water filtration. So it started out as a microplastic filtration idea, and it's now pivoted into a company that filtrates phosphorus out of wastewater.
Yes.
And that's especially very, very important within the shipping industry.
No.
The container shipping industry, no? Because you explained me that you worked on water filter system for big container ships.
Yeah, you
because they have to carry, mixing it up.
Yes, you are. That was the original idea was filtrating microplastics in the oceans.
Yeah,
and that's what you're talking about. I haven't told you about the next one. I will now. Now
okay,
you will know.
Cool.
Yeah. So when you have a situation where you have fields where you grow potatoes. You dig up some phosphorus and nitrates. You need that for fertilizer. Phosphorus especially is a limited rare earth mineral. So there's a limit to it. There's about 50 to 100 years left of phosphorus. Then we have no more fertilizer. And then you dig it out of mines in Morocco or Russia, dump it on the fields after processing. Potatoes get nice and fat, and they eat about 20% or 10. Only 10% of the phosphorus. The rest is washed out with rain into rivers, into lakes, ultimately into the ocean. And this is food for plants. So what happens in the lakes, we have a problem right here in Zugersee. It has too much phosphorus, is what's called eutrophication. And that basically means that algae will grow. If there's too many of them, they'll shield the light. Light doesn't reach the plants underneath. They don't do photosynthesis. They don't create oxygen in the water. And when the algae die, they also decay, and the decaying process uses oxygen. So it's oxygen depletion, and then the fish can't breathe. They die. So it's a vicious circle you start. And this is happening all over the world, in Europe, in Denmark. It's that Denmark wants to fight this. We also want to fight it now. The government here also wants to do it now. And so we have a solution for that, where we take the phosphorus out of the water through a machine and bind it to some substance. That's the first part of what you call a circular economy. It's the first half arc. We can remove it, and then and if we can be successful with that in terms of profits, we can then fund the R&D that goes into the other half. That is, how do we extract that part back out and put it back on the fields? So, and there are already some ideas. And we're working in Denmark with 2 public institutions. One is called Klimatorium. It's really an interesting initiative up in northwestern Denmark. And another is called Clean Cluster, which is the engine that drives every water-related thing in Denmark. Danish government has decided that they want to be world-leading in water technology. And they're really putting money into it. So we just went to a conference. We got paid.
Yeah, you just came back on Saturday. I saw Beata.
Yeah, Saturday night. Yeah. Last week in conference in Denmark, and I mean they pay for us to show up there. It's really helpful. So in that sense, I think thanks to my Danish background, I had the opportunity to do this in Denmark. So what started out as a tax refugee from Denmark to Switzerland is now a taxpayer in Switzerland investing his money in Denmark.
In Denmark.
So they're coming back now. So it's a circle closed. So that's the short story about me.
Well, quite the introduction.
Yeah.
Søren, thank you very much. It's fascinating to listen to where you come from and
I know
what
Frank has a million questions in his mind. Everything's working in his mind, and I'm so happy to see that, because I somehow expected that from you guys meeting each other here.
No, we live in the same village. A few hundred meters apart. It's definitely gonna have a beer.
Yeah. So you have a beer and I have something because I stopped drinking alcohol about 6.5 years ago. So because it was a good idea.
Okay.
Anyways,
you can have non-alcoholic beer.
No,
that's blasphemy.
No.
I agree. Yes, blasphemy.
No. So now, what's interesting is when I listen to you is the parallels to how I grew up professionally.
Yeah.
Because all the foundations, all the basics that you had to go through in order to make things work, you needed to understand. Okay, so how does this work?
Yeah.
For me to use it. So you had to understand, okay, so how does a computer work? How does TCP/IP work? What's the background of all of this?
Yep.
So whereas today we have a user interface, software, hardware, whatsoever, which takes away all of the need for knowledge.
Abstraction. Yeah.
So it's just use it. You don't think about it. So this is in my professional life, when I have discussions about any very, very new topic that is there and that is hot, I can always fall back to the foundations and say, guys, this has been around for many, many, many years. Now it's marketing.
Yeah.
So I find that very, very interesting. So in all of and we need to talk about this. Maybe we need to have a technical podcast or a digital podcast or whatever, to talk about certain things, and maybe a little bit about business as well. So then I'm going to talk to you about, so my background. You mentioned Apple. I worked for Apple for 21 years.
All right.
So there is there's some parallels in that, and when you say, okay, so it's delivering value through technology and putting people in certain positions that they've not been before because of the technology. This is what Apple says, enrich people's lives. And I think it sums it up very, very nicely. So, but of all of the topics that you have covered in your professional life, what is closest to your heart?
Oh.
The topics. I mean, what I usually say is, what am I doing? Why am I doing it?
Yes,
it's pretty basic. It's putting a smile on other people's faces. That's what I like to do.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't even need to know it's me. I mean, I smile if they smile.
Yeah.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
Yeah. And that's with everything you do.
Yeah.
Since I know you.
Yeah.
Everything you do, it's not for the fame. It's not for the public. It's not
it's for
the money. Yeah. It's you and your heart and the other people always.
Yeah.
And very visionary. And I sometimes think we've been talking about that a lot, being on a spectrum, right? If we're talking about psychology and all that stuff, I think that's kind of what other people would say, somehow being nerdy on a spectrum. But I think it's just thinking big and visionary for the people all over the world.
It's not that big, really. It's the most natural thing.
Yeah, but Søren, I know you're pure, and I know you're grounded, and you when you talked about that Crypto Valley Association thing, right?
Yeah, it's up. In order to understand this and act this way, you need to let go of these three vices of humanity called vanity, greed, and power lust.
Mm-hmm.
That is it. Actually, I believe that the other two, the greed and the power lust, are all based on vanity.
Yeah.
Somehow you can relate it to.
Yeah.
Sure.
And then, have you ever seen the movie? What is it called? Something with the devil. It's Al Pacino playing, starring.
Al Pacino and
The Devil's Advocate.
Devil's Advocate and Keanu Reeves.
Exactly. And the last sentence is when Keanu Reeves and his wife finally falls for temptation.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, you see his face, the devil's face, Al Pacino saying, "My favorite vice is vanity."
Yeah.
And that is probably what's driving most of what's happening in the US right now. It's terrible to look at these guys, these clowns running around trying to become what somebody wants a Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah.
I mean, why?
Yeah.
Because the other guy got one.
Look
at him. No. He got one too. I need one too.
It's
I like that. I like the vanity and like that you say right most. So like greed it derives from vanity, and that's probably it.
Yeah, but look, this is the world we grew up in. When I grew up, when you guys grew up, I don't know, guess so. We went to school, and the others now they have one phone, and I want a better phone because my side mate at the desk in the school has one of these, and people want more and more and more. We grow up in a world where these gadgets, where the pride you have for yourself comes from how others regard you in terms of what trinkets you can put on your chest, basically. Medals. It's the value system is skewed, in my opinion. It's something else you need to value.
But it has always been skewed because it was always something that people, and I myself, I'm absolutely guilty of that.
Me too.
Showed to other people and say, look at this, look at what I have, without saying it, but basically, but showing it. But it was different. It was different in.
But it's but you didn't do it with the wrong mindset.
Well, yes, no, with the wrong mindset. Absolutely.
With the wrong mindset.
Oh yeah.
I have a point here actually.
Oh,
This is quite interesting.
That's very.
Look, if you look at nature. If you look outside the window, you see a big tree and a small tree. And the big tree grows and shades for the small tree. The small tree doesn't get sun and dies.
Yep.
Nature is about competition.
Yeah, maybe.
Evolution doesn't happen unless vanity or greed or some of these elements are present. So it's a balance. But if it goes too far, it's also unbalanced. So you need to find the right equilibrium. And I don't have a definition, but it's a natural thing.
It is. It is. It's a human thing.
Yeah.
So and not with a bad intention.
And trees do it too. I mean,
trees,
mosquitoes.
Everybody. This is how evolution works.
Exactly.
And this is how nature works. And so I'm going to be better than you. For me to survive, number one, and number two, to develop myself into something better. Yeah. So the tree that grows.
However, then you have wolves, for example. Lonely wolves that fight bulls, they might not survive very much.
Yeah.
So they find a way to team up so they can survive better. And they create a culture or a set of rules between them by which they abide so that it works. And this is what we smart human beings do. So we call it laws or constitutions.
So, but then what the wolf pack does, if a member of the pack does not add to the value of the pack anymore, there you go. It's always survival of the fittest. So this is what nature is all about. And then humankind came along and said, wait. It cannot be that. we need to find something different. So
it's still the same.
It is still the same.
It's still Darwinism. What's happening right now on the political scene is just another swing from one side to the other of the pendulum, or what you want to call it. Yeah. It's a new step in the evolution. It might not be a very healthy step because it looks like a third world war could break out. It's not very nice, but just another step.
It's actually one of the things, that I'm thinking about when I grew up, when I was younger, and looking at all of the politicians. I obviously didn't have the insights and overviews that I have today, but I always thought, okay, so what's not going to happen is any kind of devastating world war anymore. We'll have national conflicts, awful national conflicts, but the world war situation, that's so far away because those politicians had lived through this. And today, the people that are in charge, and it's always individuals. It's always individuals playing with fire. Mm-hmm. They have
red buttons,
fire and red buttons, and whatnot, and national guards and whatnot. And it's not only in the U.S. It's not only in Russia. It is everywhere. So there's fire everywhere, and not everywhere. Everything's fine over here. So, but it is.
You think so?
Yes.
Okay.
But yes, absolutely. When not only compared with other situations, but also in general and from a high perspective, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You have Switzerland, you have Scandinavia, Holland, and everything else is downward from there. Still, I can find things to improve even here. Yeah.
Of course, and this is what mankind is all about. Yeah. What you said, trying to put a smile on people's faces with everything that you do. I always say for myself is what I'm trying to do is that when people talk about the time they've spent with me, for whatever reasons, they say, "That was a good time."
Yeah.
So and I think this because it's for me it is all about time. Because at the end of the day, nobody makes it out of this alive. So
life is dangerous.
Life is dangerous.
In fact, I don't know anyone who survived it.
No,
neither do I.
No, that's right. So and spending the time as fantastic as possibly be, and not only spending the time, but also making sure that everybody else around you in your reach, and however far that reach is, spends a fantastic time while being here. Hey, this is the goal. And
you think everybody will agree with you, even those with the big yachts that will say, "Yeah, but the friends I invited on my yacht, they are having a great time."
Yeah. So I think vanity is a vice, but it also has
it's a driver.
It's a driver.
Yeah. Yeah,
and it's a driver for good.
Yeah, it's both. You have to appreciate the fact.
Yes,
it exists. It's natural, and you need to learn to live with it and cope with it the right way. That's why we have laws. That's why the wolves have a set of rules. That's why we clever human beings have constitutions, but they're not always perfect. I think maybe a few more amendments could be made to the Americans, so a new president couldn't take over like this one. You can improve stuff, yeah.
It's quite so. I really expected that too. So the discussion is quite intense, as it is always with you, sir.
Oh shit!
Intense and interesting. No, always like very mind blowing and inspirational too. So if the fairy comes today to you and says you got 3 wishes for free, what are your 3 wishes? Just in general.
The first wish would be you gotta get 3 more.
That you get 3 more? Okay. The fairy says, no, I'm sorry. Only 3.
They don't ask for 2 more.
No.
They don't ask for 1 more.
Nope. No, only the 3 you have.
I don't know.
And then it's done, yeah.
No, when I see a shooting star, people always say that you have to wish something new. Something for while you can't tell anyone. And I say, I can tell it because mine always comes through. Because what beautiful. I wish is to see another.
Cool.
No, if I had some wishes, I don't know. I won't get any. There won't be a fairy.
It's a very tough
I never
question.
thought about that. No, I don't have an answer for that.
That's okay.
Yeah. I don't know.
I know it's a tough question. It would be a
How
tough
about
question.
yourself?
3 wishes.
Yes.
No,
World peace.
I'd love to. Honestly,
Yeah.
no, I'd love
Yeah.
to. That would be just, yeah,
Yeah, but
a
the
little
thing
bit
is,
more peace.
the question
respect.
is funny because you can't. There
love.
won't be a fairy, and that you can't change things immediately.
No, and sometimes I know that, and I sometimes think it's very frustrating. It frustrates me.
Yeah.
And then I rethink it again. What is my little thing I can support or give to the world to make it a bit of a better place?
Now I have 2 answers.
Oh, now you have 2 answers.
One would
okay.
be that I'm not frustrated.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You get frustrated often?
No, I get frustrated when I read the news. Damn it!
Yeah.
Currently.
I stopped reading the
No,
news.
yeah, same as me. Same
There's
as
different ways to solve getting
Yes.
frustrated. One is not to read,
Uh-huh.
but that's frustrating in itself because you
It
don't
is.
know. So the
Mm.
way to resolve the frustration is resolve the situation. So you can extrapolate it in there. And then I wish I slept better during nighttime. And the last wish would probably be that mosquitoes get extinct.
3 very
Okay.
special wishes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hate them.
Yeah. So the mosquitoes, watch out. Yeah.
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 Yeah. We don't like you.
So for me, thank you for nobody asking. So I have
yeah,
one, I have
sorry.
only one.
Yeah.
I have only one.
One wish? If the fairy
Yes.
comes,
No.
you got
No.
one wish? Okay.
For now.
For now.
But let's save the other 2. You know, just
Okay.
in case she comes into the door. and one would be unconditional coolness. So don't get frustrated or don't get angry about anything.
Yeah,
So just
cool.
stay calm, stay cool, and all of that. You know, sometimes I manage to do that, and sometimes I don't. And surprise, surprise! Every time I react cool and laid back and relaxed, things are better.
If you do not get emotional about it. Yep.
Well, there's a difference for me. There's a difference between emotional and getting angry or enraged about something. So for me, the emotion needs to be there. You know, otherwise it doesn't have any deeper rooting into yourself.
Okay.
But not getting furious about things. I tend to get furious about things.
Yeah, you sometimes do.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's
And
okay.
things that are out of my reach. You know, that is that's fantastic.
That's
Yeah.
So we've been talking about all these visionary things around the world.
Yeah.
What do you think is the purpose of life?
42.
I know. Yeah, I know. It's a very heavy question, but what do you think?
Actually, I don't think there is a purpose. But if there is any, it would be that the race or the species survive. It's down to that Darwinistic natural baseline. But of course, as human beings, we like to have fulfillment of all kinds of purposes. Religion speak of purposes to enter heaven instead of hell, or all these things that I really don't believe in. The only thing I believe in is solid facts and science. But that doesn't mean that I'm not spiritual in the sense that the religion is bad. I think the 10 Commandments make sense.
I don't think spiritually is related to religion.
If
But
you take it with the 10 Commandments, that thou shall not kill, I think that's not a bad idea, actually.
that's true.
It's not but maybe the first one is debatable.
Yeah, I can't remember it all, but
You know, the
they've
first
been
one is
outdated.
thou shalt not have any other gods. That
Okay.
maybe that is debatable.
Yeah.
So, but you're right. You know, thou shalt not kill is that's a good call.
Actually, I do have another God, and
Which is
that's you.
okay.
And
Other
you.
humans.
And everybody on the planet, every human being with our big brains, we're able to create and destroy life. We are able to do what God supposed to be doing, but we're not very good at it yet.
Yeah, I agree.
No, and
actually, paradise is not after we die; it's right now. We are sitting
Thank
on
you.
it.
Oh my God.
This is the paradise.
This is the best time we ever get.
Take care of it. Yeah,
this is the best time we ever get.
That's what you do. You take care of turtles, for example. That's beautiful.
I did.
Yeah,
because I did it for the turtles, and I did it for my heart.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very important.
And a little bit for vanity.
Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Nah.
So why really did you share it then?
The vanity is just on the way down there. Once you get your hands dirty, it's not about vanity anymore. It's just about the damn turtles.
Yep. That's on fleek. I'd say so.
Okay.
No, I think it was very important for me I totally lost connection to nature, and sometimes I lost connection of being human.
Yeah.
Because I was working so hard, and my days were so long, so I totally lost my sense of connection to nature and being human. So it was very important for me to get back to the basics. To the basics, like.
Yeah, you really did a fantastic thing.
Bare feet.
I'm really envious. Seen the pictures for her travel. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So what the question, and we're coming from technology talk to nature talk to philosophical talk. Hey, this is the philosophy hour with Angie, Søren, and Frank. Welcome. So there's a lot of there's a lot of ground to cover. Now the question is, you lost your what it means to be human. The question is, what does it mean to be human, and what is it, and to nature? Why? There's people who are absolutely happy and balanced and giving to society and whatnot who can't stand nature. So there is. So I think it is very individual. There's some basic things. You got to breathe, you got to eat, you got to sleep, you got to drink.
I had to learn to breathe again. Yeah, it sounds very silly, but I had to learn to breathe.
Yeah,
properly again. I couldn't breathe anymore.
Yeah.
It was
I know what you mean.
Everything was so tight.
You did the right thing. You remember when you came over to me one of the days and said, "I'm gonna quit my job and I'm gonna travel the world," and just said, "Congratulations."
Yeah. I know. Yeah. You really did, and I think you hugged me. You hugged me too.
Yep.
So, but having a job. So maybe not only for the money, but let's be honest. In the society that we live in, money is a very good tool to get you a motorcycle, for example. So fulfilling some of your vain wishes, money can be a tool. So there's nothing bad about money. And having a job can give you some kind of purpose, can give you maybe some kind of purpose, that you have not found anywhere else.
Yep.
Because you're not able to, or you don't want to, or whatever the reason may be, or even you have found your purpose in the job that you're being paid for.
Yeah.
So that is so I've been working since I'm 17, and not for the fun of it, but to have food. So because there was no more food left, so I had to purchase food. So that was when I started working. Now, in all of those many decades, I liked what I was doing, and of course, some enabled me to do some things, and let me travel and let me meet people and understand more things about the world and what's happening, so in the business and whatnot. But it also gave me a real emotional fulfillment. Saying, okay, hey, here's what I did. I solved a problem with technology. I made someone's day better because they understood, oh, this is how I can use this, or this is what I can do with that in order to help others. So, so no, it is there is, and the corporate world that I worked in, that is a totally different story, and we can talk years about what's good and what's bad. So, but it also, when you find your place in all of this, and a place, that really fulfills you, it can be very fulfilling.
Yeah.
To have that.
Of course.
Yeah.
If you can marry the fulfilling part of a job and the necessity for the representation of value called money, then you're good. This is what the dream of most people is.
Mm.
Yeah.
Again, money is a tool.
This is a representation of value. You can exchange it for food.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's it. So in terms of so you talked about some of your entrepreneurial adventures, and so what you're currently working on. Just for my interest, what is today a technology, and please don't say the obvious, that really excites you, where you say, now this is something interesting where I would like to go into?
Well, the obvious.
Is it the obvious?
AI, yeah. That is
why?
Because it's so fundamentally changing everything. Mm-hmm. And I started working on AI. It was called neural networks back in the days. Basically, when I was studying, so we are talking 85 or something like that. My father found an article in Scientific American. My brother and I went to visit him in a weekend. And he showed us this article where some people at, I think, MIT or Stanford were trying to simulate brain cells. My father is a psychiatrist, brain researcher. He had an interest in it. And so showed us this and thought, is that something possible? What is this? So actually we tried to make a neural network back then. And I've been following that since. What this neural network could do with just, I think it was 32 neurons and an old IBM mainframe computer, really slow. But we could take 1,000 Danish words and where the hyphenation between the syllables, the first hyphen, and we would then train it with 100 and then see how well it performed the remaining 900 different words. And we were able to do that to an extent where it became 96, 97% accurate. So somehow some few electronic simulations of brain cells gets a hunch, an idea of the Danish language. Mm-hmm. That is amazing. And now we're talking millions, if not billions, of brain of nodes in these AIs today, and they are separated into different brain centers, if you want, that take care of vision, and one take care of hearing, one take care of thought, one take care of whatever. So this is evolving extremely fast, and this old movie we all remember called Terminator, especially Terminator 2, one of the best ever. I love that movie, but it's a scary scenario, yeah. And this is not impossible, not at all, unless we are clever. The problem I have with it is it probably won't be cyber, what is it called, Cyberdyne or whatever it's called, going self-aware. Mm-hmm. It would rather be some people with sufficiently with vanity and greed and power lust abusing it against others. Yep. And this is what I'm really scared about.
Yeah.
And this
is, if I may continue, because what I believe the blockchain technology could potentially help with is to create the plumbing underneath these AIs that keeps them in check. Mm-hmm. Maybe. But I don't know how. This would require yet another bunch of large amount of money and a lot of PhD students trying to explore all kinds of models, etc. If this is indeed possible, and then iterate until you find it.
That's a very interesting thought. So having blockchain as the control infuse, and as you said, the plumbing.
I wouldn't even call it control, just to make sure it stays honest.
Or stays honest.
What is a blockchain? A blockchain is really simple. The metaphor I usually use is a stack of papers. Mm-hmm. And when you put another piece of paper on top of the stack, you can't change it and you can't remove it. If anybody tries, you can prove it and dismiss it. And this is what a blockchain does. It's just a great ledger you can't fake.
Yeah.
And this is also what the AIs need in order to make sure that everything is accounted for correctly, auditable by other AIs or humans, whatever. So you can check if things are indeed what they look like. Mm-hmm. So this is what now we have the problem with media. And there's also a fantastic application for blockchain technology to and something called prediction markets. I can explain what that is if you want. How to incentivize people to upvote good information and downvote bad information. You won't get it 100%, but you will get closer to getting good information and screening out bad information.
How do you classify good and bad information?
Yeah, it's up to the individual, but usually it's something with research. If you can prove you have gathered the facts.
Yeah, but I think then you try again to control something, which I don't think.
Well, it's maybe it's not. And you said that certain controlling, but vetting. So basically checking. So number one, is this true? Number two, has it been altered in any kind of form
but again,
and way?
I think that's such a difficult topic. Is it true?
No. Is it true? Is it true? Is not difficult.
You have to let me finish,
please.
Yeah,
because
sorry,
the whole thing is about decentralization. It's about the truth comes from masses. Let me give you an example. This prediction market is called this terrible name for it. Doesn't make any sense. But let's say that during the Clinton and Trump campaign, a Gallup poll would reach out to people and ask, who do you believe will win the next election? And some people might pick up the phone believing that Hillary will win, but say Donald Trump will win, just to make sure that to scare enough people. They won't be honest. However, if you ask the person, you give me $5, and then you say who wins. And if you're right, I give you 10 back. And if you're wrong, I keep the 5. Then the person would make a little more effort in being truthful. So if you incentivize it and you spread it on the masses, you get an average that's closer to the truth, much closer. It's actually proven mathematically. This works. So prediction market is a valuable way of extracting what is probably the truth or closest to the truth. You're right about what is the truth. There's also always an individual an opinion, but in some cases it's not. I mean, if it's mathematical or physical, you can
I
prove
agree.
it.
Yeah.
Also, if it's an event that happened and people say it didn't, if you have footage that you can prove it through, some things can't be proven or fact-checked rather. So there's a large opportunity for creating a media where operators or readers of the media, the public, can fact-check and make a buck for it. But they have to stake. That means that if you want to be part of the earning of validating information, if you're not truthful with what you do, you lose your money. And then people are incentivized to do it right. This has been proven to work. So there are mechanisms how exactly to evolve it into something useful for the entire media, and if people would even want it, or whoever is out there on the world stage today, they would probably try to prevent this from happening. So you have it's not a simple thing, but just finding out how to do it, that's a mission I would sign up for. This is why I built Crypto Valley also. There's things like that.
Here's an interesting aspect of all of this. So where you're coming from is, again, from basic knowledge, which is human behavior.
Yeah, it's psychology. It's neurology.
So
or how do you?
Yes, I have technology, whatever, in as a tool and in the background, but I have humans feeding that technology with information. Now I need to understand how human behavior works, and I need to understand how to get the the best possible. Is it the best possible? Is that
the optimal?
The optimal, the correct, or whatever behavior out of that group of humans by incentivizing them.
Yeah. Decentralizing and incentivizing correctly.
Yeah. So, and this is what fact-checked, proven, whatever we want to call it. So this is the foundation of all of that. And then there is the personal judgment, and then there is personal emotion. Hey, this is correct.
Yeah,
this is even relevant.
Vanity,
Can I finish? This is even. see, so I'm picking up. So and this is but do I like it or not? Yeah. So there's a lot of confusion about this is correct information, but I don't like it. Both can exist with the same piece of information. There's a lot of confusion. No, it can't be right because I don't like it. This is what we're facing today.
Imagine you had such a system where you could challenge people of the world to validate if something is true or not. What would be your question? Does God exist?
No.
That would be no. Wait, no.
That would create quite some stir.
No, that would probably be one of the first questions.
Yeah, I think so.
So okay, we have a system.
What would humanity, if they were truthful, all of them, what would they end up doing with such a question? Starting fighting over that they are not agreeing on who God is, which has now happened for thousands of years.
But that's very interesting. Now let's say entire humanity, everyone on this planet, 9 billion, everyone, every single one, somehow has agreed there is a system that has the final truth. At Apple, that was Steve Jobs. He had the final truth. So everyone on the planet agrees that system has the final truth.
About what?
Anything. Like Trump has
anything.
Yeah.
Oh. The final truth. Everyone has agreed about this. So everyone is, what this thing says or shows us or whatever is true, it is relevant, and we will follow it. Yeah. What would be the top 10 questions? Yeah. And
that's funny.
So everyone has agreed this thing knows it. It's just there. What would be? And the first question would be, does God exist?
Life after this.
Is it life after death? And still, everyone would have agreed. No. This thing knows this.
What pills can I take to kill a hangover?
Hopefully not.
So what would be the
most common? Yeah. How can I get more sex?
Yeah. We're back to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Exactly.
So we're
Maslov's.
That was you didn't get what I said. What's the meaning of life? No, what's the meaning of life? So our generation would say 42. Basically automatically.
What?
So 42. So the answer to the question of the meaning of life is 42. It is
it's humor.
it's
what?
No,
dark humor.
Dark humor.
Okay.
It's from a book called Hitchhiker's Guide Through Galaxy by Douglas Adams.
Okay.
And it is basically that the entire not only the human, but the entire known universe, stands in front of a computer, and the computer has been calculating for millions of years what the answer to the question of the meaning of life is, and it comes out and just spits out a little sheet of paper.
42.
42. So and that's, and everybody goes 42. So I once met Douglas Adams.
Yeah.
I met him in San Francisco, at the Macworld, and that was a different keynote for the Macworld, because usually it was somebody from Apple on stage, and Apple had pulled out of the Macworld, and so they asked. And you probably know this name, Kai Krause. Kai Krause is the engineer behind CorelDRAW. So he invented CorelDRAW, and he invented all those Photoshop plugins, Media Creations. Yeah. That is Kai Krause. He's originally from Essen in Germany, and he fled the army and went to the United States, and this is where it created. Anyways, so they asked Kai Krause, could you deliver the keynote for the Macworld in San Francisco? And he said, yeah, but I'm going to do it something differently. I'm not going to be up on stage. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have a round table with a couple of friends, and we're going to talk about technology and arts and the combination of all of this. So he invited, so it was Kai Krause as the host, and then he had Douglas Adams. So he invited Douglas Adams, so he was on stage. Herbie Hancock, so came on stage. Todd Rundgren came on stage.
I remember that name, yeah.
Thomas Dolby, and a musician, audio engineering, and all that, and Charlie Fleischer. So they had all these people up there, you know, and talking. Everybody was awed because there was so much understanding and knowledge and different perspective on technology and arts and life and science and whatnot. So it was fantastic. So Hancock coming from a different angle than Adams, and then after that was finished, I still had a press ID at that time. So I walked up to Douglas Adams. Goosebumps. Said, Mr. Adams, my name's Frank. I work for technology magazine in Germany. It's called MacUp. I'd like to do an interview with you. He said, absolutely sure. Please call me Douglas. Blah blah blah, whatever. And then I flew back to Hamburg, and then we had a call, and we set up the interview time and all that. And then he passed away.
Oh.
It was, but just those 5-minute exchange, you know, with that was fantastic. So,
I also had my brush up with people who are something on this planet vanishes. The last one was Navalny, Alexei Navalny.
Yeah,
I met him in Kazan. At a conference there.
Oh, okay. Wow. Yeah. And what did you guys talk about?
Nothing. I was so jet lagged that I could only shake his hand and find my way to bed. So unfortunately, I never talked to him. Yeah.
Oh, that would have been quite interesting if you had the chance.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. But otherwise, I've there's many things I haven't told you, and that beer is definitely necessary. Or it could be a cup of tea.
So we'll find something.
Yeah. I also worked as a journalist for a computer magazine, Computer World.
Almost
10 years. Computer World.
Yeah, I think you guys have many things in common.
We should sit down. We should absolutely sit down. So and really, I would invite you to, because I'm working on another podcast.
Yeah.
And I call it The Business Review.
Right.
So talking about our experiences in business over the last decades, and talking about the topics and talking about what's happening in business.
Not with me.
Not with you. No, so just that's fine. So we're 1 hour and 23 minutes in. I'd like to ask you about what's your music. What kind of music do you listen to?
Any kind.
Any kind. What are your 3 favorite musicians / bands?
Yeah, if I only knew, it would be Dire Straits, or actually Mark Knopfler, because he's a fantastic guitar player.
Yeah.
I think Pink Floyd, or some of the other old bands from that time, and then we go back in time, so it would be some classical music like Mozart, or even Richard Wagner.
Yeah.
So it's melodic music, but I can't just put them 3, because sometimes I'm in the mood for listening to heavy metal. When I was just driving home, I was listening to a Finnish band called, Nightwish.
Yep.
It's bloody good.
Yep.
I like everything. What I don't like stupid music. Or what is stupid music? It is like this that you hear in the radio all the time.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
It has to be some.
Yeah. It was so funny yesterday when I went to do my to get my pedicure, and she's a beautiful, loving Vietnamese lady in the old town of Zug, and she has a big screen, and there's always music on, and they were playing love songs from the 70s to 90s. And I was sitting there watching the music videos and Queen and all Queen, these old bands, and I was sitting there and I was like, fuck, that was like really good music back then.
Actually, the best music for me is no music, just listening to the birds in the forest. We live up that as a chorus.
Hintermætlen.
I love it. Yep. I love it. That's enough. Yeah. And frogs. There's some guy with a pond with frogs, very close to your parents. You will hear it.
I know.
It's Beat,
I think it's Beat. Beat. He has a
he has frogs, and we can hear
them. During that time.
Joe and Claire. So my parents-in-law, they do have frogs as well down in the little pond.
Yeah.
They go nuts up there. It's really beautiful. I think they're gone now, but early in the summer when it starts, I open the windows and doors up in my sleeping room so I can hear it. It's just a soothing sound.
Søren, there's going to be a follow-up if you're up for it. So we're trying to keep it with south of 1.5 hours. With all of this, but there's so much ground that we've covered.
We're past that. We're 133 now, I see.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
So the intro was the most detailed intro. There were no questions left after the intro.
Oh no, I had questions left.
Yes, but that was quite detailed.
All right, that's good.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. That's absolutely fantastic. So let's continue this. Sure. And then maybe we pick a topic, so where we dive into the grooves of all of this.
I can suggest a few.
Yeah. I can. By the way, so you know Nikolai Nikolaisen? Do you know? And I'm not going to pronounce his last name correctly. Daniel Bjerregaard.
Daniel Bjerregaard.
Bjerregaard. So yeah.
No, Daniel, I don't know. That name rings a bell, but Niklas, yes. Actually, the whole introduction to Bitcoin came from him because at that time we were both software developers contracting for small companies in Switzerland and looking for something better. And we ended up applying as CTO for the same company, both of us.
Yeah.
And there was something wrong with his setup, and I did not trust the CEO there. Some guy told me, I won't say who, that the other guy I'm competing against is, by the way, also a Danish guy from Zug. At that time, it wasn't so hard to find out who.
No.
So I actually get in touch with Niklas, and we meet outside a little office, him and Johannes had in Bar, up on the top floor, just an end of a room, where they were trying to figure out what to do with Bitcoin. And Niklas and I both smoked, so we went outside and smoked 5 cigarettes each. We smoke a lot. At least I did back then, and talked about it. So what are you doing, and what am I doing? And I was working on this secure mail server software, and he was talking about this Bitcoin, and I should have a look at it and buy as much as I could. Blah blah blah. I think we're talking 2011 or something like that. And then I go home and study this Bitcoin, and I see the blockchain and the protocols behind it. I think this is fucking fantastic. So I throw everything aside and focus solely on blockchain technology for that. Start building my own blockchain. I built my own Bitcoin node with some extensions. So Niklas was the first guy I addressed when I wanted to set up the Crypto Valley associations as an actual association and attract the board. And he was quite willing to join.
Yeah.
His vision was similar to mine at that time. It wasn't about the money. I don't know where it is today, to be honest. We don't see each other anymore. But I mean, he's an old friend.
There's quite the Danish community in Zug and in Switzerland.
Oh, there's a very big and even here in Valchwil, we have a few.
I'll give you a funny story, actually. When we moved to Valchwil because we got kicked out of the apartment we loved in Zug. Waldheimstrasse. Not because we were bad people, but because the sewering system inside was so rotten that they had to throw everybody out and restore the whole building. So we got 1 year, and then we started looking around in Zug, in Oberwil, but no further away than Oberwil. But then my wife said, let's have a look in Valchwil. I found 3. So we would drive down here, and 1, 2, and the third one was just fall in love with. It's Dorfstrasse 5.
Oh, yeah.
Where we
you
live.
ended up, yeah.
And since then, we've just stayed here. And when we arrived here in Valchwil, I didn't know anything about Valchwil, except that the Gemeinde was right. The old Gemeinde was right across the street. You could see through the windows. Yep. And I had a form I had to fill out and send to the Gemeinde. It was like looking down the street. The mailbox is 200 meters down by Engel, and the Gemeinde is 20 meters across the street. So I thought, I'll walk over. So I walk over and knock on the door and say, can I just give you this? Yeah, you're new in town. Yes, I'm new in town. She called everybody from the old Gemeinde. All 3 of them came down to say welcome. And then one of them asked where I'm from, and I say, aus Dänemark. And she looks at me and says, noch ein. And that's when I learned that there's about 7-8% of the population in Valchwil alone are actually Danish, or Scandinavian at least. Yeah. So
that's quite a big number.
It's really one of the largest Scandinavian ethnic colonies outside Scandinavia. Yeah. It's right here in Valchwil.
Right here in Valchwil.
And I didn't know. Had I known, I wouldn't have moved here.
No, very nice. Very nice.
But I know a few of them, but I'm not really in touch with most of our friends are basically mostly Swiss or mixed nationality.
Yeah. When I was traveling for work, when we did 4 major roadshows for Apple over a period of 4 or 5 years to introduce new software, new hardware, new technology, whatever. So we basically started in Helsinki.
Yeah.
And then 25 stops later, we end up in Lisbon, and then we had some cascading events as well. So it was fantastic, but it was exhausting. And it was traveling to places now, and then you're in London, and then you're in Barcelona, and then you're there. And every time I went to Helsinki, Stockholm, Copenhagen, or Oslo, it was, this is relaxing.
Yep.
This is very nice. Thank you. Just the experience from going from the airport to the city center by train, just the thing. Oh yes. This is very soothing. Thank you very much. I loved it. Yeah. I loved it.
I still love it. It's still like that. Just go somewhere.
Yeah.
I can recommend the northwestern Jutland. It's just beautiful nature and laid back people, and they all rise. It's just like, actually, it's not that different from Valchwil.
Yeah.
That's why I feel so much at home here. People are really friendly. Everybody takes care of each other. Such a small community, you can't do stupid things. As I usually say in Denmark, when they ask me back in Copenhagen, why do you live in this little village? I say, if I were in Copenhagen and I go out on a bar and I get completely fucked up drunk, I go and grab the girls by various parts of their body and break the nose of the bartender, get thrown out by the police at 2 a.m. I can come back 2 weeks later and nobody will know who I am. You try that on Fyrabik, 10 years before they say hello again.
Yeah. No, true.
This is the small societies. This is what I learned. I grew up in a big city, and I'm not moving back to any time soon. This calmness, and I like that. That's the backside, the flip side of it also, because people know each other a little too much. As I also say, if I fart at night in Hintermettlen, it'll be in the front page of the local news next morning.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
I've read that. Yeah, it was quite the headline. It was quite the story.
Huh?
But it's a metaphor, of course.
No.
That was a joke.
Humor.
Humor. Okay, 42.
I was joking.
But you get a little too close sometimes, and sometimes it's nice not to be that. But I think it's better to have that, because respect is growing out of that.
It's been taken care of. Yes. Over here, and this is people really do care, and you feel that. Yeah. Angie, you have one last question? Or?
One last question. I do have one last question. Søren, if there is anything you want to say out to the world right now, and maybe you haven't said before, would there be anything?
Smile and be happy.
Yeah. Don't worry, be happy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Søren.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was quite the end note.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for spending time with us. Thank you very much for spending such splendid time.
Thank you.
Putting a smile on our faces.
Yeah.
And
definitely.
would love to have you back.
So now I can go have a smoke?
Yes, you
Absolutely.
can.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
All right. Cool. Thanks.